The bunker trembles. Another naval shell strikes the concrete above your head. Your fingers tighten around the MG42's spade grips as landing craft cut through the morning haze below. In half an hour, you'll fire your first ammunition belt. In 9 hours, Allied soldiers will march through the trench behind your position. You're not just observing D-Day, you're manning the weapon that shaped it. When the battle ends and you lift your hands in surrender, will the troops advancing on your bunker see you as human? Or will rage born from a morning of killing decide what happens next? This explores more than a legendary machine gun. It examines the men who operated it during the invasion and their fate when circumstances reversed. Most surrender accounts conclude with prison camps and eventual release. But on Omaha Beach, some had different endings. The MG42 served as a general-purpose machine gun throughout German forces. It achieved nearly 1,200 rounds per minute, double the rate of most Allied weapons. Teams replaced overheated barrels every few minutes during intense combat. A primary gunner controlled aiming and firing. An assistant managed ammunition feeds and handled barrel exchanges using protective mitts. Additional crew members transported ammunition containers and monitored blind spots. 20-year-old Heinrich Severloh never anticipated spending the morning of June 6th operating one of these weapons. Assigned to resistance position WN62 overlooking Omaha Beach, he'd awakened before dawn to air raid warnings and distant naval bombardment. By sunrise, he gazed through his firing aperture at what he would later describe as surreal, countless Allied vessels extending to the horizon. The fortifications above Omaha formed clusters rather than linear defenses. These strongpoints, called Widerstandsnester, created overlapping fields of fire. Intersecting machine gun arcs swept the open sand, eliminating safe passage routes. Pre-assault bombardment pounded the coastline for over an hour, yet numerous positions remained operational when initial waves landed. Concrete thickness exceeded Allied estimates. When landing craft doors opened, entire companies advanced directly into horizontal fire streams designed to halt forward movement, what Germans term Streifenderbeschuss. The opening assaults suffered catastrophic losses because expected support failed to materialize. DD swimming tanks should have provided covering fire. Heavy seas and faulty deployment decisions sent 27 of 32 tanks beneath the waves. Infantry found themselves exposed on empty sand. From the German perspective, the assignment demanded precision under extreme stress. Heinrich Severloh later recalled those opening moments. The burden of ammunition belts, the mechanical cadence of his weapon, and his growing awareness that despite mounting casualties, more attackers kept advancing. Controlled bursts prevented overheating. Shifting aim distributed casualties across the landing zone. Wounded soldiers attracted medics, multiplying targets. Tracer ammunition required careful rationing since muzzle signatures revealed positions. One operator maintained fire, while another exchanged hot barrels using thick protective gear and secured replacement components. A third crew member retrieved fresh ammunition from storage boxes against the rear wall. Casemate interiors were confined and deafening. Ejected cartridges ricocheted off concrete surfaces. The atmosphere grew acrid from propellant residue and heated metal. Vapor escaped from overworked barrel housings. Coordination relied on shouted orders and visual signals. Telephone connections to command posts failed early during the preliminary bombardment. These preparations didn't ensure survival. Attackers adapted rapidly. They crawled between scattered protection points. Demolition specialists cleared beach barriers while under fire. Infantry squads used concealment and terrain features to advance incrementally. Critical intervals lasted mere seconds, empty ammunition feeds, jammed mechanisms, brief moments that determined whether assault teams could close the gap. By mid-morning, Severloh operated his weapon without assistance. Mortar fragments had killed his assistant. He managed ammunition feeds single-handedly while adjusting his aim. Throughout WN62, the defensive garrison diminished steadily, yet landing craft continued approaching the shore. Demolition teams advanced when possible. Sergeant Philip Streczyk assembled a 5-man unit and moved up the slope toward WN61, a fortification that had controlled the dog-white area throughout the morning. They maneuvered through anti-tank obstacles and wire barriers, transporting rocket launchers and explosive charges. Assault tactics followed deadly precision: reconnaissance, movement, engagement. Study the weapon's firing cycles, rush forward during barrel maintenance, employ smoke screens to obscure approach routes, close to effective range, then strike decisively. Bangalore torpedoes cleared passages through wire entanglements. Satchel charges, canvas containers filled with explosives, could breach firing apertures or destroy entrance barriers. Flame projectors forced defenders from observation slits and created panic within enclosed spaces. None of these methods were swift or certain. Streczyk's team eliminated a 50mm anti-tank gun initially, then advanced methodically up the incline. They neutralized 7 defenders and silenced 2 machine gun positions, while suffering 1 fatality. This single engagement opened an inland route and reduced pressure across an entire beach sector. Most fortifications didn't succumb to direct frontal attacks. They failed from flanking maneuvers. Small groups discovered ravines and draws leading behind the concrete positions. Once inside the trench systems, bunkers became prisons for their own garrisons. Entry points designed to exclude attackers became bottlenecks when explosives began detonating in corridors. Heinrich Severloh had expended nearly 400 ammunition belts when he detected American voices in the trenches beyond his firing position. The sound chilled him completely. For 9 hours, his sector of responsibility had been absolute. Now enemies occupied areas his weapon couldn't engage. Machine gun teams functioned as unified organisms, but thermal management governed everything. Metal surfaces burned through heavy protective equipment. Lubricant smoke rose from receivers operating at maximum rates. Barrels became incandescent after continuous firing. Teams maintained brief bursts to preserve mechanisms, though tactical doctrine became secondary when successive waves continued charging. The protective firing slot that shielded Severloh also confined him. It restricted his view like a narrow tunnel, amplifying beach activity while concealing approach routes from protected angles. Tracer rounds encouraged pursuing individual targets, but training emphasized different priorities. Focus on probable advance paths, maintain low trajectory, allow the impact area to create casualties. Communication determined psychological state. Functioning field phones provided connection to larger operations. When lines went dead, severed by explosions or bombardment, concrete enclosures felt like sealed tombs. Then came sounds every machine gunner feared: footsteps pounding through communication trenches behind the bunker, English commands echoing nearby, the characteristic sounds of American military equipment. Severloh removed his MG42's receiver cover and seized a rifle. The era of machine gun dominance was ending. Now began the period of potential surrender, assuming he survived long enough to attempt it. Consider the sequence that unfolded across numerous strongpoints that afternoon. Grenades bounced down concrete stairways. Voices reverberated in entrance passages. Heavy steel barriers groaned under explosive impacts. Then came penetration, brief, violent, overwhelming. Surviving those initial moments meant confronting a choice carrying life or death consequences: continue fighting, attempt escape, or surrender. Each option involved substantial risks. Persistent resistance virtually guaranteed death. Retreat through trenches might succeed if timing remained favorable. Surrender required precise timing and considerable fortune. Legal requirements appeared straightforward on paper. Geneva Convention 1929, dropping weapons and signaling capitulation transformed combatants into prisoners deserving protection. Harm after that transition was prohibited. Reality on contested ground proved more complicated. Most machine gun teams who indicated surrender were taken into custody. They underwent searches, disarmament, and transferred to assembly areas behind the landing zone. However, beaches weren't legal courts. Soldiers operated on adrenaline and recent trauma. Some had witnessed their friends and leaders die. Others had evacuated wounded comrades to the waterline before returning to combat. Timing proved crucial. Did surrender occur before final assault or after explosives detonated inside bunkers? Did operators discard all weapons and retreat with empty hands, or did someone retain sidearms? Could attackers clearly observe surrender signals, or were they already committed to lethal action? Reports exist of isolated incidents where surrender went unacknowledged. Some accounts contain specific details, others dissolve into speculation. Historians continue debating which events have verification and which reflect traumatic memory distortion. The most reliable statement remains uncomfortable. International law established guidelines, but human emotions sometimes spoke louder. Initial gestures involved raised hands, open palms, extended fingers, downward gaze. Weapons were removed immediately. Personal equipment, helmets, and remaining ordnance were stripped away. Security personnel searched for concealed firearms, intelligence materials, or demolition devices. Captives moved in small formations to secure areas away from active combat. At WN62, Heinrich Severloh made a strategic choice upon his eventual surrender the following morning. Surrounded by American forces after hiding overnight in shell craters, he provided identification and unit information, but concealed his machine gun operator role. He'd observed the treatment of some weapon crews. Documentation procedures commenced once zones were stabilized. International law was explicit. Prisoners could be compelled to provide name, rank, and serial number exclusively. Additional information could be declined. Medical staff treated wounded Germans alongside American casualties when resources permitted. Others waited under supervision while advances continued inland. Temporary detention facilities appeared near landing areas and in cleared zones beyond the heights. Wire barriers, fatigued guards, and the burden of defeat maintained order. Some captives trembled from concussion effects and adrenaline. Others fell asleep while sitting, finally able to lower their defenses. Transfer to permanent facilities required road network establishment. Once beach passages were secured, transportation and foot columns moved prisoners toward inland collection points, then to Britain, and ultimately across the Atlantic to detention camps in the United States and Canada. Machine gunner represented no distinct legal classification after capture. What mattered was weapon silence and tactical situation changes. Some interrogators sought intelligence about unit strength and defensive arrangements, but regulations limited permissible demands, and most prisoners provided only minimum required information. By early afternoon, battle dynamics had reversed completely. Rangers and engineers had discovered routes up the heights. Weapons that had dominated the beach now faced threats from above and behind. Some teams attempted withdrawal through communication trenches. Others remained at their positions hoping for acceptable terms. A few continued fighting until the conclusion. At strongpoint WN61, Sergeant Streczyk's assault had created breakthrough opportunities. Once American forces reached elevated ground, they could eliminate the defensive line systematically. The process became methodical. Isolate individual positions, deploy demolitions, destroy entrances, clear systematically. Afternoon reports demonstrate developing patterns. Isolate, destroy, clear, secure captives, advance. Individual heroic acts mattered, but sustained momentum proved more significant. The beachhead required depth, not merely scattered footholds on sand. For teams who survived to indicate surrender, the remainder of June 6th became a different ordeal. Fear persisted but transformed. Concern about artillery fire from their own weapons. Worry about being mistaken for active combatants. Anxiety about surviving the evacuation from heights. Most did survive, some perished. Exact figures remain contested, but the pattern is evident. Surrender was typically accepted when offered clearly and promptly. Heinrich Severloh spent his first captivity night in a shell crater, listening to German artillery fall short of intended targets. He'd survived the most intensive engagement of his existence, only to face potential death from his own side's counter-battery fire. War's ironies were never subtle. Many captives spent the rest of the war in detention facilities across Britain and North America. They labored, waited, and observed the conflict conclude from behind barriers. Routine was very monotonous: attendance checks, work assignments, correspondence when authorized, and gradual recognition that they might be among the lucky ones, those who would eventually go home. Years later, some revisited Normandy as visitors or pilgrims. Heinrich Severloh returned in the 1960s and walked through WN62's remains. The concrete firing position endured, but vacant now. Vegetation grew through cracks in the firing opening. Omaha Beach was now different, silent and peaceful. Some former adversaries met during peacetime. These encounters were hesitant and emotionally intense. Statistics and tactics diminished with time. Faces and voices persisted. Severloh eventually contacted American veterans, including some who had been present that morning. Conversations were challenging but essential, acknowledgments of mutual survival rather than celebrations. Memory converted the MG42 into symbol and mythology. Cinema captured its characteristic sound, that fabric-tearing buzz veterans never forgot. The weapon became synonymous with German defensive capability and the cost required to overcome it. Museums exhibited captured specimens alongside accounts of those who confronted them and those who operated them. What happened to MG42 operators on D-Day? Most who survived combat and surrendered clearly became prisoners, then veterans, then elderly men with accounts they seldom shared. Some perished in final chaotic moments when law and human fury collided. Others were killed at their stations before they could surrender. The weapon mattered due to its tactical significance, but the deeper narrative belonged to those who served it, confronted it, and survived it. Heinrich Severloh's testimony, despite disputed specifics, reveals fundamental truth. Warfare reduces human choice to seconds and distances. Preparation, equipment, and doctrine matter, but individual decisions during terror often matter more. These lessons transcend military chronicles. When examining events like D-Day, we're not glorifying weapons or tactics. We're attempting to comprehend the cost of choices made by ordinary individuals trapped in extraordinary circumstances. The machine gun teams, assault engineers, medics who treated all sides, each was shaped by their era and training, yet remained human beings confronting impossible decisions. Please share in the comments what you think and how you feel about the human cost of war. This approach to military history helps us remember why these events mattered and why those who experience them deserve better than the circumstances that shape their fates. Subscribe if this topic resonates with you. Understanding the past requires looking beyond weapons and tactics to discover the human beings who made it real and who paid the price for the world we inherited.